items, and then so this will show red lines, but on the screen is the updated version. So I think I need to read them because they're updated.
Two more came in the last 45 minutes. So, folks are not going to have that.
No. So I think we need those to consider. I would think we can. We're good. I'll call the meeting of the McHenry County Zoning Board of Appeals to order. The reason for our hearing today is application 2023-051. The applicant is Maple Valley Materials, LLC, and the request is for a renewal of conditional use permit 2014-004 to allow earth extraction and adding a ready-mix batch plant in the A1C district. The address is on Maple Street in Marengo, and it's located it's a 111-acre tract located on the west side of Maple Street, approximately 1,475 feet south of the intersection of Maple Street and West Coral Road in Riley Township. The PIN associated with this application is 1613300-006. At this time, I'll have the members of the zoning board introduce themselves and the township in which they reside, starting on my left.
Mary Donner, Greenwood Township.
Robert Cozen, Algonquin Township.
Charlie Eldridge, Richmond Township.
I'm Linnea Kustra from Alden Township.
Vicki Gardner, Nunda Township.
Kurt Schnabel, Riley Township.
Bill Koenig, Grafton Township.
This petition has been reviewed and the following items have been received prior to today's scheduled hearing. The publisher's certificate of publication from the newspaper is dated October 31st, 2024, and thereby meets ordinance requirements. The affidavit of posting was signed and the date posted was November 4, 2024, and thereby meets ordinance requirements. The affidavit of mailing was signed and the date mailed was October 29, 2024, and November 4, 2024, and thereby meets ordinance requirements. The survey has been checked against the petition, legal notice, and publication in the newspaper, and all three match. The filing fees have been paid, the endangered species consultation has been received, and the McHenry County Soil and Water Conservation District report has been received. This would be NRI number 230924552. The way the hearing works, just for those of you who maybe haven't been at a hearing before, is that this is a quasi-judicial hearing, so there is testimony that's been given. This meeting is being recorded so that any testimony then would be translated or transcribed for further review. So anyone that wants to make a statement or ask questions, you'll have to be sworn in. And also, this is not a rally. This is like a court type of a situation. So there's no clapping, there's no cheering. You will be allowed after the board, the petitioner will present their evidence, then they'll be asked questions from the board, and then also staff. Then if any member of the public wants to ask a question, you have to do it of the testimony they have given. You can't do it outside the parameters of what's presented here. But you'll be allowed 3 minutes. And I have the timer on my phone. And I just ask, because there's so many of us here today, that if you're saying the same statement as someone before, rather than restate it, if you would just say, I agree with so-and-so and what they presented, and then if you want to talk about something different, that would be helpful in order to move the hearing along. After that is all done, all the questions have been asked, then we'll hear the staff report from the county staff. And after that time, if you want to make a statement, you know, the first part is only questions. After that, you'll be given 3 minutes to make a statement if you would like to regarding what you feel about the petition. And again, if you cannot be repetitive, we can move this along. You can say, I agree with so-and-so, what their statement was, I agree with that. So at this time, anybody who's going to ask a question or present any testimony, I would like to swear you in. So please raise your right hand if you would like to speak today. This includes any member of the public. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you give today shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. All right, Mr. Saladin, I'll turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. My name again is Mark Saladin. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Zank, Cohen-Wright & Saladin in Crystal Lake. I'm here on behalf of the petitioner, Maple Valley Materials, LLC. You've described where the property is, and what we're requesting is a renewal of the existing conditional use permit for earth extraction, and we would like to add the ability to have a concrete plant at the site. We will go through the specifics of both of those as we go through our testimony today. As you may recall, this has been approved at 2 different times. It was approved in 2003, and then 10 years later in 2013, it was approved again. The economic circumstances regarding the construction industry and the ability to mine products, has substantially impacted not only Maple Valley Materials, but also other producers in the area. We have 2 witnesses today. We have Mr. Steve Gavers, who is one of the owners of the petitioner, and we have Jeff Shue as an engineer with Patrick Engineering. One thing that has occurred, I think, in the last 10 years, which wasn't a part of the process 10 years ago, was we've got now the Site Plan Review Committee process in the county. So the Site Plan Review Committee process brings the site plan and our plans in front of every department in the county. And we did receive approval from the Site Plan Review Committee relative to our plans. And we hope that as we go through our testimony that we're going to present a number of safeguards that are part of the process that hopefully can alleviate some of the neighbors' concerns. Obviously they'll have their concerns. They're certainly, able to make those concerns known to all of us. But I remind you that, the gravel industry in McHenry County is a thriving industry that's here because the gravel is in these locations. And so with that, I'd love to start the testimony.
Go right ahead.
So could you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Steve Gavers.
And what's your position with the petitioner?
I'm a co-owner of Maple Valley Materials.
What's your current address, Steve?
15620 West South Street, Woodstock.
And who are the other owners of Maple Valley Materials?
My brother, Dan, and my mother and father.
And what does the company do from a business standpoint?
We're in the sand and gravel business, and we're also in the ready-mix business.
And do you currently operate a sand and gravel facility?
Correct.
And where's that located?
In Woodstock, on
And-
Rose Farm Road.
And have you had any issues with the county relative to their inspections, relative to the process in Rose Farm Road?
No.
And at this location, who do you intend to sell the product of this facility?
This facility here, we want to do a majority of in-house to supply the ready-mix plant.
And we'll explain that in a few minutes as we get into our testimony. And are you familiar with the subject property that's the subject of our petition today?
Yes.
And is the property located on the west side of Maple Street?
Yes.
And it is approximately 1,500, 2,400 feet south of Maple Street and Coral intersection?
Correct.
And the property is located in Riley Township?
Correct.
And does the property consist of 111 acres?
Correct.
And the record title holder of the property is Maple Valley Materials, LLC?
Correct.
Is the property currently being cropped and farmed?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more of the history of the subject property as to when it was first permitted and what happened since then.
First permit, I believe, was in 2003. Basically, after that, the economic situation pretty much collapsed around the whole country area. And it's been a very trying, I don't know how you would say it. It's some days it's been tough, but we'll get through it.
And could you tell us a little bit about your company, about, is it a large company? Do you do national products, or is this a small
we're
family company?
a small family company.
Tell us a little bit about the subject property as far as how it's bordered. Could you tell us what the zoning is on the west side of the property?
On the west side of it is all probably CUP, or how you want to call it, A1C. There's two different mining companies to the west of us.
And the A1C refers to a conditional use permit for earth extraction, is that correct?
Correct.
Do you know what those companies, who actually mines those areas?
One is Wholesome to the south and Consolidated Materials to the north, both on the west side of us.
And those are much larger producers than you, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And to the north and to the south of the subject property, is the property there zoned A1?
Correct.
And then to the east of the subject property, you do run into some residences, and are those in the A1, the R1, and the E2 classifications?
Correct.
And Steve, are you familiar with the staff report that's been produced for our hearing today?
I am.
And the staff report discusses the McHenry County 2030 plan. And is that designation called agriculture in that plan?
I believe so.
And relative to some of the references in the comprehensive plan, they refer to big ideas. They refer to big ideas 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're mentioned in the staff report. Relative to big idea number 1, there's some concern about groundwater. And will the petitioner be following all guidelines in the county relative to groundwater monitoring?
Yes.
And in fact, did you have to obtain a baseline PNA, which references the polynuclear aromatic hydrocarbons test for the water?
Yes.
And have those been submitted to the county?
Yes.
And is it your intent to have active mining on the subject property?
Yes.
Now let's talk about the concrete plant. And Anna, if you could pull up the slide relative to the location.
This one? Or you want your,
I think it's probably in the mine plan. Is
It's
that
probably exhibit 6 maybe.
there? Steve, and what we'd like to do is, obviously, staff has all of our exhibits on the system, so we're being able to review these, on the screen. So I would ask that this kind of be considered a group exhibit at this time. All of our filings that we've done, the mine report, everything else that we have in there, I would suggest we refer to it as Group Exhibit 1. And then as we get to a specific slide, we'll reference the head of that so that we can identify that as we go with the transcript, if that's okay, Madam Chairperson.
That sounds fine.
Okay. So Steve, what we're looking at is an exhibit of the, what would you call this?
I think this is exhibit 6. You should be able to scroll down.
yeah,
I just want to be specific.
Yeah, exhibit 7, exhibit 7, okay.
Exhibit 7 of the mine report, which is part of the group exhibit.
You want to go back one.
There. So Steve, tell us where this concrete plant would be located on the subject property.
It would be in,
Steve, hold on, sorry, I think you have to go back one more. I think it'll show the
There you go.
outcomes. Yeah, that's exhibit 6.
it's in the upper left-hand corner, which would be the northwest corner of the property.
So the far northwest corner of the property up near the main entrance road on the north end of the property, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And tell us about the equipment that's used for a concrete plant.
So the concrete plant, you basically have two hoppers, and you have a silo that holds the powder. And basically, the two hoppers hold the aggregate, which would be sand in one, stone in the other. The underneath of the silo, which is directly above the truck when it backs under to get loaded, has a hood. And it's a recovery system. And the boot that's in the middle of that goes down in the truck. The hood comes over and covers the top of the truck where it's getting loaded. It's got a vacuum, which is a recovery system. So anything that's fugitive is sucked back into the plant and put back into the silo.
And what's the height of the plant?
Very top of the silo would be 62 feet, probably the same as a regular silo at a farm.
And is the equipment that you're using for the concrete plant new equipment?
It's brand new.
And how is it operated? Powered.
It is operated by electric. And there is no emissions at all from that.
And how is a concrete plant like this regulated?
This is regulated by OSHA, which then is also regulated by MSHA, which is Mine Health and Safety, for two things, for noise and for any dust.
And how many employees are typically a part of this process?
There'll be one operator and a loader operator.
And will the company use the proposed concrete plant, given the family business, is that correct?
That's correct.
Who owns the Ranger Ready Mix and Materials company?
Myself and my brother.
And where is that located at?
That's in Woodstock, at the end of Donovan Avenue in town.
And is there a similar type plant at that location in Woodstock?
There is, yes.
And do you know how close you might be to a neighborhood with that plant?
I'd say less than 500 feet.
Have you ever had any complaints from neighbors at the plant in Woodstock?
We've been there 22 years and we've had none.
And the petition did receive approval from the Staff Plat Review Committee, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, have you retained the services of Patrick Engineering and specifically Jeff Shue to provide an updated mine plan, reclamation plan, engineer's estimate, and an operations plan relating to the property?
Yes, correct.
Now, in the staff report, there are a number of conditions that staff are recommending for approval. These are similar to what's already been approved, but what I'd like to do, not only for the board, but also for the audience, is to go through the specific conditions and make sure that you understand what those are and that, Steve, you're approving those, that those are acceptable to you. So if you don't mind, and it may take a few minutes, but I do want to go through this. Now, what I'm going to do is, there are some conditions that are better answered by Mr. Gavers, and there are some conditions that are going to be better answered by Mr. Shue. So if I skip one, don't worry about it. We're going to get to it with Mr. Shue. And then that's the other thing I'd like to remind the board and maybe even the audience is that a lot of questions that will come with the specifics of the mine will probably also be answered by Mr. Shue. So, you know, there'll be times when you're going to be looking at me going, well, who's going to answer that question? We're going to get to that, okay? So relative to the conditions of operation, I'm going to just go through these. Now, the time limit for a
If
condition.
you want to just go back and forth with them even while you're going
this
through that,
point?
if that's helpful
Oh, sure.
to you.
Yeah, so we're going to
That's fine.
kind of
As long
jump
as you
ahead at times.
introduce- As
Yeah,
long as you introduce him, that'll be fine.
okay. You know, yeah.
Sorry.
Yes.
Would it be all right to ask if Mr. Shue's answers would be binding on the applicant? Meaning as if the applicant himself answered?
That would be fine.
That would be
Yeah.
fine.
Thank you. Then it's
Yeah.
one person, one voice.
Okay, okay. All right, so we're gonna go right to Steve then.
Okay.
All right, and we'll remind Jeff of these as well as we go. All right, and do you agree that the time limit for a conditional use permit will be 10 years from the date of approval by the county board?
Yes,
Condition number 2, existing trees, shrubs, and other types of woody vegetation along road frontages shall be protected and maintained. Weeds and other unsightly noxious vegetation shall be cut or trimmed as may be necessary to present a reasonably neat an appearance to prevent grass fires or other hazard of grass fires. Is
Yes.
that acceptable?
yes,
No earth extraction and or mining operations is permitted to operate in such a manner that the groundwater table of surrounding properties is adversely impacted. In the case of mining operations, water pumped from the site for the purpose of washing shall be retained in a pond until the silt and clay settles, and then the water recycled in the areas affected. Groundwater quality shall be monitored and maintained on a regular basis in accordance with monitoring practices. Groundwater monitoring parameters are established in section 16.56.030, capital P 8, groundwater monitoring in the UDO. Results of the monitoring shall be made available to the zoning enforcement officer as required. Is that acceptable?
yes.
And in fact, when you do monitoring of your wells on Rose Farm Road, who does those samples?
We have a independent company called Pace Analytical, which is in direct contact with the county for the reports of the water.
So Pace then would submit the reports directly to the county, but you pay for that, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Number 4, the owner and or operator shall repair any section of road adjacent to the access road to the property that is within 500 feet of either side of the entrance damaged as a result of hauling operations, but shall not be responsible for the normal wear and tear of the road. This provision shall not be construed to require the owner and or operator to purchase additional right-of-way. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
And in fact, could you tell the board a little bit about what happened with the dedication of the right-of-way along Maple Street around 2006, 2009?
I don't know the exact measurement, but we had to, the length of the property on Maple Street, we had to dedicate right away to the county highway department.
And from my understanding, that dedication, because a lot of this rural property goes to the center of the roadway, then the county requested that you go 55 feet and actually dedicate that to the county. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. So even though maybe the road right-of-way at that time would have been 30 feet from both sides, but here we had to go from the center line 55 feet and produce that, in a deed to the county. So you did that before. And that took approximately 4 acres out of the site. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Steve, condition 5, all operations shall be conducted in a safe manner, especially with respect to hazards to persons, damage to adjacent lands or improvements in wells, and damage to any street by slides, sinking, or collapse of supporting soil adjacent to an excavation. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
All right, the following apply to earth extraction and or mining conditions only, not to reclamation conditions, okay? Number 6A, earth extraction and or mining operations that remove and do not replace the lateral support not approach property lines, established right-of-way lines, or any public roads, streets, or highways closer than a distance equal to 30 feet unless a lesser distance is mutually agreed by the operator and adjacent property owner and submitted in writing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The bottom of the slope of the exacted face shall be no closer to the point determined in section 16.56.030, capital P 7EI, then a distance equal to 1 1/2 times the depth of the excavation. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
C, if consolidated materials occur in the excavated face, The slope of the face may be steeper than 1 1/2 to 1 slope per section 16.56.03 P7E2 for the depths of those materials. However, all other excavated slopes of unconsolidated materials are limited to 1 1/2 to 1 slope. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
And D, in the case that the right-of-way has not been recently surveyed by a registered land surveyor and clearly marked, the right-of-way line is assumed to be, for the purpose of this section, a minimum of 40 feet from the center line of the existing road, although we do know that it is than 55 feet pursuant to the previous dedication. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay, now, condition number 7, there's an alternate, condition number 7, which we had talked to staff about. This is in respect to the earthen berms that are located around the property. What we're proposing is alternate condition number 7. Steve, an earthen berm no less than 8 feet in height, as depicted on the landscape plan prepared by Patrick Engineering, which is Appendix D, and the mining plan, Exhibit 6 of the mining plan report, shall be provided. Berms that remain in place for 1 year or longer shall be planted with grass, shrubs, and trees, and maintained as a visual and acoustical screen. They shall be designed so that they do not erode into the road or highway right-of-way or onto the adjoining property. A gate shall be placed at the main entrance that will be locked whenever the owner, operator, or their agent is not on site. Said landscaping shall be insulated and maintained in accordance with the landscape plan prepared by Patrick Engineering as Appendix D of Exhibit 2 Mining Plan Report. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Number 8, the processing and stockpiling of aggregate resources shall not be conducted within 300 feet of any adjoining residentially zoned property line. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Number 9, the hours of operation for all activities other than maintenance functions are restricted to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Mondays through Fridays and 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturdays. In emergency situations, operations are permitted at times otherwise prohibited. In parentheses, an emergency situation for the purpose of this section is an operation necessary to provide repairs to roadways or provide other materials and assistance that, if delayed until normally permitted hours, would cause injury or loss of life or property. Any operation or activity under this section shall immediately be reported to the McHenry County Sheriff's Department and reported to the zoning enforcement officer the next business day. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Number 10, operations shall be conducted so that noise levels and air and water standards comply with federal and state of Illinois requirements. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Number 11, access ways and on-site roads shall be maintained in a dust-free condition. A dust control plan shall be submitted to the zoning enforcement officer prior to the issuance of an annual operations permit. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
The premises shall be neat and orderly, free from junk, trash, or unnecessary debris. Buildings shall be maintained in sound condition, in good repair and appearance. Salvageable equipment stored in a non-operating condition shall be suitably screened or garaged. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Item 13, enough topsoil must be stockpiled to meet the finished conditions of section 16.56.030 P7E of the McHenry County Unified Development Ordinance. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Number 14, no operations may occur on the property pursuant to this ordinance without the issuance of an annual operations permit issued by the zoning enforcement officer. The operations permit may be for less than the total areas proposed. Note, the construction of access or haul roads, building and landscaping of required berms, and other site improvements required for site preparation shall not require the issuance of an annual operations permit. The zoning enforcement officer shall issue said operations permit upon receipt from the owner or operator of the following items. A, an operations plan, mine plan, and mine phasing plan, which was last revised June 25th, 24 by Patrick Engineering as Exhibits 6 and 7, in compliance with this ordinance and other applicable county ordinances. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
B, a reclamation plan, mine reclamation plan, last revision date June 25th, 2024, by Patrick Engineering as Exhibit 8, in compliance with this ordinance and other applicable county ordinances. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
C, a groundwater monitoring and protection plan in compliance with the county's Unified Development Ordinance, the adopted groundwater monitoring ordinance, and other applicable county ordinances. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
D, a surety as provided by the county's Unified Development Ordinance based upon the engineer's opinion of probable reclamation cost prepared by Patrick Engineering dated June 26, 2024. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
And for the boards, we will get to that with Mr. Shu's testimony. E, a copy of all applicable county, state, and federal permits or statements of exemption therefrom. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
F, an approved McHenry County stormwater management permit. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
G, a dust control plan. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
H, a spill prevention, containment, and control plan. Is that
Yes.
acceptable?
Yes.
In fact, with all of these conditions that I just read, you are obligated to perform those at your existing site. Is that correct?
Yes.
Number 15, at all times, the owner and or operator shall take adequate measures to ensure that contaminated surface water runoff shall not enter ponds or other areas of open standing water. A spill prevention, containment, and control plan shall be submitted to the zoning enforcement officer prior to the issuance of an annual operations permit. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
In fact, for the boards, there is in the mine plan an exhibit which includes the spill protection and containment plan. Item 16, the owner and or operator shall take adequate measures within the site to ensure that trucks exiting the site on roadways do not discharge earth materials or debris on the roadway. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
17, the zoning enforcement officer or a duly authorized representative shall have the free right to access to the subject property for the purposes of inspections, making water level measurements, obtaining water or material samples, and for gathering other information necessary for the proper discharge of his or her responsibility. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
18, the owner and or operator shall be assessed an annual fee to pay for compliance monitoring based on costs. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Prior to the termination of this conditional use, the owner shall cause to be filed with the McHenry County Recorder of Deeds an easement approved by the zoning enforcement officer after review by the McHenry County State's Attorney's Office, which shall provide access to the real estate for the purpose of monitoring and sampling of the then existing wells. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Number 20, the owner and or operator shall provide groundwater level and quality reports using data from monitoring wells and staff gauges. These reports shall meet the requirements of section 16.56.030 P8 of the McHenry County Unified Development Ordinance. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
21, to the extent lawfully permitted by the Illinois Department of Revenue, the point of sale of excavated materials from the site shall be deemed to originate in unincorporated McHenry County. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
22, all operations, reclamation, and ongoing uses shall comply with the terms and conditions of the McHenry County Unified Development Ordinance, the McHenry County Stormwater Management Ordinance, and the McHenry County Stormwater Management Permit. The requirements of these items shall supersede the operations plan and reclamation plan approved by this ordinance. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
23, decisions of the zoning enforcement officer subsequent to the adoption of this ordinance are subject to the normal appeals procedures set forth in the zoning ordinance and or state statute. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
24, the owner and or operator shall provide proof of petition to Mine Safety and Health Administration, MSHA, for the use of alternative safety warning mechanisms other than backup beepers. If approved, the alternative method must be used when vehicles are on the subject property as it applies to the MSHA approval. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
25, before the site is reclaimed, a vegetative buffer strip shall be installed along the slope around the mined area in order to reduce the potential of surface water pollutants from entering the mined area by providing an area for filtration and infiltration of water. Said buffer shall be vegetated using the Native Plant Guide for Streams and Stormwater Facilities in Northeastern Illinois, NRCS, as amended, as a minimum standard. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
26, the owner and/or operator shall not mine into the clay barrier above the Glassford Aquifer. Is that correct?
Yes.
And acceptable. And Mr. Shu will get into the details of that as well. Number 27, before an operations permit can be issued by the McHenry County Code Enforcement Officer, Maple Valley Materials LLC shall cause to be installed a new well on the property identified as exception on the plat of survey dated October 11, 2002, signed and sealed by William Vanderstappen. Parcel ID number 1613300-004, and submitted as part of this conditional use request. The well shall be drilled to provide water of adequate quality and quantity. Is that acceptable to you?
Yes.
28, lighting on the property should be directed so that it falls within the property and so to not affect the neighboring property, excluding lighting required by the Highway Commissioner for ingress and egress. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
29, all other federal, state, and local laws shall be met. Acceptable?
Yes.
And 30, the owner and/or operator shall erect a sign at the exit of the property reminding truck operators to adhere to designated truck routes. Said sign shall be erected within 3 months of issuance of an operations permit and shall remain clearly visible during the duration of this conditional use permit. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
And thank you for allowing me to do that, because I think it got specific, with certain areas that people might not have been able to hear before. And then, Steve, I'm going to ask you about certain conditions and would like to confirm our approval of these conditions. Well, we already did that, I'm sorry. We're going to review the approval standards for conditional use permits, okay? And this is based, we're going to hear further testimony from Mr. Shu regarding a lot of these issues, but I wanted the owner-operator to understand what these conditions are, and that in his experience, his gravel experience, his operation of an existing plant on Rose Farm Road, their operation of the cement plant in Woodstock, Illinois, that they meet this criteria. And Steve, based on what you've reviewed, your experience, the site, the mine report that we produced, do you believe that the petitioner has demonstrated the ability to meet all applicable standards contained in section 16.56 and 16.60 of the UDO?
I do.
And do you understand that the site shall be so situated that the proposed use is compatible with the existing or planned future development of the area?
I do.
That the establishment, maintenance, and operation of the conditional use shall not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare of the neighboring vicinity, based on all of the conditions in your operations. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
That the conditional use shall not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted.
Yes.
That the conditional use shall not substantially diminish and impair property values within the neighborhood.
Yes.
That adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and other necessary facilities have been or will be provided to the site.
Yes.
And that adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress and egress so designed as to minimize traffic congestion and hazard on public streets. Is that correct?
Yes.
That the conditional use shall in all other respects conform to the applicable regulations of the A1 zoning district in which it is located. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you believe that the conditional use is reasonably in the interest of the public welfare?
Yes.
And do you believe that adequate measures will be taken to provide protection to groundwater recharge and groundwater quality?
Yes.
All right, I have no further questions for Mr. Gavers, but I wanted to, if you have specific questions for Steve, or do you want me to move on to Mr. Shu, and then you
I think you
can?
can go ahead and move on, and then we'll have the whole presentation. We can ask
Great.
either individual.
Thank you, I appreciate that. That will help, instead of asking a question that Steve's gonna look at Jeff and say, what? Okay, could you please state your name?
Sure, Jeffrey Shu,
And what's your business or occupation?
Civil engineer.
And what is your work address?
My work address is 55 East Monroe, Suite 3450, Chicago.
And could you please tell us your background and educational achievements?
Sure. I received my bachelor's degree from Valparaiso University and then went to Purdue University to obtain my master's degree in geotechnical engineering. I've been engaged in civil engineering for 40 years, a little more than 40 years, mostly on large industrial and transportation projects. And I've been involved in dozens of aggregate mine studies, permitting, done quite a bit of work here in McHenry County, and really almost all the work there involved, like groundwater flow, mine operations, reclamation, cost estimating. Actually, I used to do cost estimating for the county way back when. And I have a professional engineer's license in Illinois and a dozen or so other states.
And you presented testimony on earth extraction facilities in McHenry County?
Yes.
We do have a curriculum vitae that we could introduce into evidence, Madam Chairperson.
Sure.
I think that's the one. Sorry. How do you want me to label this? A
Group Exhibit 2.
Thank you. Thanks, Anna. So, Mr. Shu, have you been retained by the petitioner with respect to this zoning petition and its operations and concrete plant operation?
Yes.
And have you had an opportunity to physically observe the site?
Yes.
Have you reviewed the previous approvals and plans relating to the site?
Yes.
And as a result of that and other activities in your work and your research, have you prepared the group exhibit, which is the mine planning reports?
Yes.
And has that been submitted to the county already?
Yes.
And does your mine report comply with the requirements of section 16.56.030P of the UDO?
Yes.
And that is the list of things that we have to produce in order to provide information to the county. Is that correct?
Yes.
So tell us about your site investigation activities at this location.
Sure. And since this was a continuation, we used information that was in prior submittals and then added information on top of that, mostly to confirm what was stated before. So it's all been checked. We researched the geology, reviewed well logs. We obtained additional well logs from the state since the last time the mine was permitted. We obtained water samples from the wells. We obtained water levels from the wells. We evaluated site grades. We looked at soils information. We did an investigation to determine the ability to put in a leach field for the mine office. We also evaluated traffic.
In referring to your report, can you explain what the existing conditions are on the subject property?
Sure. It's really like Steve said. It's farming, most recently with soybeans. There's some scrub vegetation on the perimeter. There's an entrance road that's present. It's concrete, the apron, and then it's gravel into the plant, into the site. So it's really just, to me, it's a typical agricultural farm field.
And was an existing right-of-way dedication already approved by McDOT, which is the McHenry County Department of Transportation?
Yes.
And are you aware that the McHenry County Department of Transportation has reviewed the site plan under the Site Plan Review Committee?
Yes, they did.
And have they approved the plans?
You know, they acknowledged the plans. They told us what they wanted. We put everything on the plans that they wanted. I don't remember if I saw anything specifically that says they approved them, but we did provide stop signs to be placed at the exit. They wanted to make sure no fill was placed in the right-of-way, so we made sure we won't be putting any fill in the right-of-way. And they wanted us to verify that there were no capacity improvements needed for Maple Street, which we did. So I believe we did everything that they asked.
Correct. Could you tell us, given your examination of the property and the previous submittals, what is the regional and site geology?
Another good question. So it can be fairly complex. It's all glaciation in this part of the world. And so the glaciers came through not just once, they came through, went back, came through, went back. They deposited different materials. But in a nutshell here in this area, the uppermost soil layer is going to be a thin layer of loess, which is wind-blown kind of deposits. It's clay material. It's 5 feet or so thick. Below that, you're going to see sand and gravel, which is the whole reason why we're here. Then below the sand and gravel at this location, and really in this part of the county, there's a till layer called the Tuscaloosa till. It's a silty, clay, gravelly, sandy matrix type material, very dense, very hard. It's pink, so you can't miss it. When you see it, you're like, wow, that looks really different. It's kind of a pinkish brown material. I've seen it in several project sites. And then below the Tuscaloosa, you have then another aquifer that is then over bedrock. So in summary, it's kind of, you know, a little bit of clay, sand and gravel, Tuscaloosa, some more sand and gravel, bedrock. And bedrock could be dolomite, basically dolomite, galena platform group. The Tuscaloosa layer is very dense, and so what it does, it's an aquitard, meaning water on top of it doesn't want to go through it, it goes along the top of it. And so that's why when one of the conditions was you can't go through the Tuscaloosa, you don't want to connect the top layer to the bottom layer. That's what they don't want to happen. The Tuscaloosa in this part of the county is thinning to the west and gets thicker to the east. And so at the site, the Tuscaloosa is you know, maybe 10, 20 feet thick or so at the site. As you get further to the east, so you've got the residential area to the east, it gets thicker and thicker and thicker to where it gets to maybe over 100 feet thick. So it's a very good separation layer between the sand and gravel layer that would be mined and the sand and gravel that's deeper, which is where the wells are located. So the wells in the area are not located in their superficial sand because it's not more than 50 feet thick. You want to make sure your well's deeper than 50 feet. So the wells go through the Tuscaloosa into the sand below it. That's where those other wells are located. So, did I say too much? I'll keep going.
No, so, and I guess part of that is, you know, what's the site hydrogeology?
Right, so the hydrogeology is the water level in the upper sand and gravel flows from northeast to southwest. And as you'll see in really almost any location, their superficial water table mimics the topography, right? If the topography is going downhill, the water's flowing downhill. At this location, it's flowing from the areas to the east, the residential areas to the east, past the site, over to Myers Pit. It used to be Myers Pit, now it's Lafarge or Folsom. I worked on it so many times, I worked on that one too. And then Riley Creek is there. So it really goes down and then it discharges to Riley Creek or it keeps going. So that's the superficial aquifer. The deeper aquifer also flows east to west, but it's separated from the one above it, okay? And the ISWS did a very excellent study.
Could you tell us what that means?
Illinois State Water Survey did an excellent study in 2013, which I'll get into in a minute, that shows the direction of groundwater flow in the different layers, the sand and gravel layer, the deeper Glassford Formation layer, and their results are consistent with our results. Water levels, direction of flow, everything's consistent. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the SARA, because I know it's going to come up, the sensitive aquifer recharge area. And so a sensitive aquifer is really an aquifer that's vulnerable to contamination from the surface. Why is that? Because it's near the surface and it has a water table that's close to the surface. So if anything gets into the aquifer, it could contaminate, right? That study prepared by the ISWS maps the upper sand and gravel aquifer. And if you really want to get into it more, look at the map they prepared, look at the SARA map, they are almost identical, okay? And Ryan, bringing that up is the only place you can have a sand and gravel operation is where? Where there's sand and gravel. Every sand and gravel location is going to be in the SARA district. It's just is going to be. So the key things there is that we recognize you have to watch it. We recognize you have to have good housekeeping. You have to have good SPCC plan. You have to maintain things well. And I believe Gavers will do that. They will do all that. And you have to monitor the groundwater to make sure nothing happens. So that's part of the plan to make sure you don't impact the aquifer. Again, this aquifer though, is not the same aquifer that the residential wells are in, just so we keep those two things separate.
Is the site located in a class 3 groundwater resource?
No.
Okay. And could you tell us about the drainage on the site?
Drainage is similar to the groundwater flow. It's really coming from the, northeast, east. There's a culvert under the road that can then go onto the property. The property it has some potholes in it, so, water will go in, it seeps into the ground, which you would expect. It's recharging, which is what Sarah wants to happen. It wants it to be recharged. And then it either flows by sheet flow offsite, or it soaks in, or it evaporates, or it's transpired by the plants. So most of it's going to be transpired and evaporated and soaked in. There is no point discharge that we could find on the site.
And could you tell us then, and you identify this in the mine planning report, about the mine operations and how they are going to do things?
Sure. Well, the first thing they'll have to have is an erosion and sediment control plan, which will be part of the stormwater permit that they will need to obtain when they actually start mining. But they will install the erosion control. You will install your entrance road, the shop, other site facilities.
And by the way, if I could cut you off, is the entrance road going to be paved?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
So it'll be paved. You then would install the septic and well system, so you have that for the shop. You're gonna strip the processing area, so you have that going. You got to take the clay off, some of the clay off, maybe not all of it, some of it off. You're gonna build the berms. You have to have the berms built. You have to put the trees up. And then once you get all that ready, you're gonna start mining, which means you're gonna strip the topsoil, stockpile it for future use. In cell reclamation, you're gonna set up your conveyor system. They're gonna set up the conveyor system starting in cell 1, bring the aggregate to the plant. The way they're gonna do that is they're going to excavate above the water table with front end loaders. You take it to I'm gonna call it a grizzly. It's a sorter that you drop it in and then the big pieces fall off. And when you get enough big pieces, then you can crush them. Then you take it on the conveyor, comes over to the processing district. It will then be washed to take any fines out. The water from the washing will go to the settling pond. The materials will then be stockpiled. So all these materials, from the time they take them to the time they go in the stockpile, they're always moist. Because even coming out of the ground, it's going to be moist. When you get below the water table, then they're going to have a drag line. Drag line will take the material out. Now it's wet. You don't want to put it on the conveyor. You put it on the bank, let it drain, pick it up, put it in the grizzly, take the big stuff out, goes back to the plant, wash it, sort it, put it in the stockpile, and then it's either going to be transported off-site for sale, or it's going to be used in the concrete making facility.
Could you identify like how the mining cells operate at this site? And I think that's Exhibit 7
Exhibit 7, I believe that's Exhibit 7.
of the mine planning report.
There we go. So you can see there are numbers. My eye's getting worse and worse. One should be on the upper, it should be on the lower right.
Southeast corner of the site?
The southeast corner of the site. So it's gonna go, you're gonna start from the south and you're gonna work your way north. And so each cell is about 3 acres. You're looking at maybe a year or so per cell. So once you get done with 1, then you're gonna move to 2, because Steve's an excellent operator. He's saying, I don't want to double handle anything. So he's gonna take anything that comes off of cell 2, reclaim cell 1. He's gonna, so 3, he's gonna finish cell 1 and work on cell 2. So he's always gonna be probably 1 to 2 cells behind him will be getting reclaimed as the ones in front of him are being worked on. Okay, so he'll just work his way through the site then, mining and reclaiming.
Will a lot of this mining be taken wet or under water?
Well, the water table, and you could look at exhibit, I think it's 5 maybe it's 3. I can't. There we go. So the depth of water there, I believe, is 8 to 10 feet below the ground surface. So he will be the first, it depends on rain, because it's been really dry lately and the water table's dropped. If it gets really wet, the water table goes up. I've seen the water table in this county, other counties, it can go up or down 3 or 4 feet pretty quickly. So he's going to start out I'm going to say the first 8 feet or so is going to be moist, but it's not dry. It's not. If you pick it up, it'll still hold together. But under, below 8 feet, it's going to be saturated. So that's what's going to happen with that. And then he's going to spread the topsoil and he's going to vegetate it. So one of the conditions was, you wanted vegetation around the slope at the water line. That's part of the plan, right? It's part of this plan to have it.
Could you then tell us a little bit about the reclamation plan that you created?
Yeah, so the reclamation plan is really pretty simple. As we just discussed, it's when he's all done, he's going to have one large lake. It's going to be 60 acres plus or minus. It's going to be anywhere from, I'm going to say, 10 to 20 feet deep or so. Obviously, that's going to change depending on precipitation. It's going to have a safety ledge around the side of it. The slopes will be very flat. They're going to be, I think, 8 to 1 or so down to the water's edge. And it would be suitable for homes, other type of development.
And have you made a determination as an engineer as to the amount of the bond that is required for future reclamation activities?
I did.
And what is your engineer's estimate?
Well, the reclamation estimated cost was about $212,000, but then you had 50% onto that, and you're around $318,000, which is more than $2,500 per acre. Which, that's what you see sometimes. People use $2,500 an acre. I looked at what's the worst case he would have with his operating plan it would cost to reclaim if he just walked. That's my job, right? My job isn't to see if Steve has his own forces, how much will it cost? That's not what it is. It's if he walks, the county has to hire somebody. What will it cost to come and do that? So that's what I did. And so
And is that a part of your mine planning report?
Yes.
So Anna, you do have that as an exhibit. Thank
Yes.
you. Jeff, did Patrick Engineering prepare a traffic study for this site?
Yes.
And could you summarize the report, please?
Sure. So we looked at the site, we talked to Mr. Gavers, and looked at the number of people that would work there. It was 3 max for the concrete plant. It was 4 or so for the mine portion. Obviously, they may not all be there at the same time, but we looked at it as they would be. And that you would have 30 concrete deliveries a day, 30 deliveries of aggregate per day, which means 60 out and 60 back, because someone's coming in empty and someone's leaving full, so you really got 60 vehicles there. Well, 120, right, because you got 30 and 30. So we did look at that. What was determined was that there's adequate site distance for the mine. You have to make sure there's adequate site distance. That left and right turn lanes are not required. There's not enough traffic to require that. And there are no capacity improvements needed for Maple Street.
Could you tell us about the weight limits that are on Maple Street and Coral Roads?
Sure, I want to bring that up too. So Maple Street and Coral Road are both McHenry County roads. And they're restricted to total vehicle weights of 73,280 pounds.
And are the trucks that would utilize this site under that weight limit?
Yes.
And relative to the concrete plant, could you tell us, does that help decrease traffic? And in what way?
Well, I guess I would say it helps to not increase traffic.
Okay.
Because remember, all the aggregate used in the concrete production are from the mine. You don't have to bring the aggregate into the concrete plant. Whereas if you have a standalone concrete plant, you're bringing the aggregate in, and then you're taking the aggregate back out. So it results in a lower amount of traffic than you would have if you had a single solitary, confined batch plant.
And, relative to the concrete plant, was there a noise study prepared relative to that?
Yes.
And who did that report?
Thunder Hearing and Sound was retained to perform the noise study for the mine. And what they did was, first they did an ambient study at the site to determine what the background noise conditions are at the facility. When they did their study, it was after the mines to the west had closed for the winter, just to give you an idea. So in other words, the ambient they had is lower than what it would be as if you did it during operating times of the mining industry. The study then, they then went to the Ranger facility in Woodstock and obtained noise readings at various locations from their facility as concrete was being batched. So now they have ambient noise, they have noise at the facility there in Woodstock, and then they came and they prepared a model then where they input the concrete plant, they input the different types of equipment we would have, they input conveyors, they input front-end loaders. They put everything in the system and said, okay, let's model what we believe will happen during mining operations regarding noise at the site and east of the site. And the study concluded that noise levels at the site are going to be less than noise limits required by the IEPA.
And Mr. Shu, you freely admit that you are not a sound expert, is that right?
I am not a sound expert.
However, it's interesting, the study was done by Dr. Thunder, which is always an interesting name, but Dr. Thunder did the study. We have provided that to the Zoning Board of Appeals. I would like to introduce that as exhibit number 3, I believe, Madam Chairperson.
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff, was there an EchoCat report filed with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources?
Yes.
Could you tell us what an EchoCat means?
You send a request into the state, the DNR, to look at a property and see if there are any threatened and endangered or other reasons that development maybe should not occur on the property.
And what was the conclusion of that report?
The conclusion was that the Swainson's hawk nest, they nest in the area, but really there's nothing at the mine would adversely modify its habitat, and they basically closed it.
And is that a part of your mining plan report?
Yes.
Thank you. And are you familiar with the staff report that was prepared for this petition?
Yes.
And now we've reviewed the conditions of the staff report. We've walked through those with Mr. Gavers. Relative to any of the engineering or the groundwater, do you feel that Mr. Gavers can comply with all of those conditions?
Yes.
And are you familiar with the Natural Resources Information Report that had been prepared by the McHenry Lake County Soil and Water Conservation District for this project?
Yes.
And will the plan, or will the proposed plans address any concerns that were identified in the natural resources inventory?
Yes.
And one of the main ones was the Sarah District, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Shu, are you familiar with the standards in the Unified Development Ordinance for McHenry County for issuance of conditional uses for these types of activities?
Yes.
And we are going to go through those if you don't mind. Given your experience, your investigation of the site, the facts presented in your mine planning report, I'm going to ask you a few questions. Do you believe that the petitioner has demonstrated the ability to meet any applicable standards contained in section 16.56, the use standards, and 16.60, the site development standards?
Yes.
And you believe that the site is situated so that the proposed use is compatible with the existing or planned future development of the area?
Yes,
And you believe that the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the conditional use shall not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare of the neighboring vicinity?
yes,
And you believe that the conditional use shall not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted?
yes,
And will the conditional use not substantially diminish and impair property values within the neighborhood?
yes. I don't think it'll affect property values.
And are there adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and other necessary facilities to be provided to this site for this type of use?
Yes,
And have there been adequate measures, or will there be adequate measures taken to provide ingress and egress so designed as to minimize traffic congestion and hazards on the public streets?
yes,
And that the conditional use shall in all other respects conform to the applicable regulations of the zoning district in which it is located?
yes,
And you believe that the conditional use is reasonably in the interest of the public welfare?
yes,
And you believe that adequate measures will be taken to provide protections to the groundwater recharge and groundwater quality?
yes,
And, based upon your review of the property and the report that you've prepared, in your opinion, will the petitioner meet all of those applicable standards?
yes.
Okay. I have no further questions at this time.
We'll start with questions from the board, starting on my left, Ms. Dunn.
Of course. Okay, so, because with your plant is going to be run with electricity, that mitigates some of the noise, correct? That would be emitted from that.
Yes.
This is to any one of the three of you who
Don't look
cares
at
to
me.
answer. Mr. Gabers, okay.
Yes.
That is one of the reasons that you're going electric as opposed to diesel or anything else, because of the noise and the pollution that those do. You
Yes.
still think that it's going to be 30 trips a day, or that would be 30 in and 30 out, that's 60? Is that going to be all year?
No, all year, you're not operating
No.
all year.
Not all
Okay.
year, no.
What generally is your operating time, like daylight savings time, so that you can?
First of all, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay, no,
We don't work at night.
okay,
We usually are done by 5.
okay,
So, the light issue, that, I don't really believe that's gonna play into anything like that.
okay, because I'm just thinking about how many trips will be going in and out if it's in less than a 12-hour period. That seems to be, and yet I don't know. I don't know if that's busy or if it's not, but,
Those numbers were an average.
so, okay. Okay, so then,
I guess I'll also say that the maximum we looked at was 7 passenger vehicles leaving at the same hour. Because if you have 7 people coming to work, they're all coming to work about the same time, and if they're leaving, they're all leaving about the same time.
so that's included in the count?
That's included in the
Okay.
study. And the other thing in the study, I think the maximum number of trucks leaving an hour was around 6 or so.
Okay,
So, just to give you an idea of what was in the study.
I just wanna share with you that, we're a small family company, we're not like over on 23.
right.
So, if that does any clarification for you.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's just that the way it was written was 30, and I wasn't sure if that was 30 coming in or 30 coming in and 30 going out, which is 60. And now that I look at it, it is the 60 total, and that's probably your cars coming in and going out plus pretty much.
Well, make sure we're really clear. So 7 cars are coming, 7 cars are going,
Right,
right? So when we say there are 7 cars, it means there's 7 cars, but there's 7 trips in, 7 trips out. If there's 30 concrete trucks, there's
correct,
30 coming in, but it's the same 30 leaving,
right.
right? So there's 30, but there's
60.
60
trips.
trips, Right.
No, I was in transportation with Pace Bus. and-
That's
and
fine,
I-
yeah.
It's the difference
It
between
can get confusing,
the
so,
number of trips and the number of one-way trips.
Right.
And that's what you're talking about. At the moment, unless I find anything else that I've written down that I didn't make note of, I think, okay, it says 3 monitoring wells that you're suggesting. And from the conversation that we were having, you already have some wells?
they're in already. They were installed, I have to give you the date, but they were installed a while back, they've been there.
Okay, and this one's only sticky for me. In 2013, one of the requests or one of the conditions was that a berm be built by July 31st of that year. Was it built to 6 feet, or did you just weren't able to do that at all? So now you're going to do one for 8 feet, which is obviously better, but you will be doing that starting immediately or in the spring or?
We will, yeah, as soon as we go over there and weather permitting is when we'll start.
Okay, so that would be similar to the berm that we found on 173 at Tanyan's place in Hebron years ago.
Oh.
They had to build a very high berm to make sure that people didn't have to see what was
Yeah,
going
I
on, and
think-
I never see that, so,
I think currently, because it's still agriculture,
sure.
I mean, there's not a reason to have the berm. I don't know why that condition came about at the time. Obviously, before operations begin, that berm's gotta go in.
Correct, correct. I was just wondering why it's taken 20 years and now you're gonna do it. That's perfectly okay if that's what you've got going. But 8 feet is a much better height than the 6 foot, and I would have recommended that to begin with when I was looking at this. So at this point, I have no other questions.
Mr. Cozen?
Thank you. To the report of the site plan review, was there ever any written transmission of their findings for the record, or are we relying on the representation of your testimony?
Well, we'll ask that question to Anna when we're available, because she was the one that coordinated that review and confirmed with me that it had been satisfied, so.
Yeah, Maple Street, is it subject to seasonal posting at all?
No,
No, it is not?
no.
In terms of the vehicles, the trips and so forth, is there a gap? And have you been able to identify the gap? Meaning you said one vehicle comes in, and then at a later time, it's the vehicle going out. Does it go out like the employees 12 hours later, or does it go out every so often?
So that-
On the truck traffic, are you talking?
Yes, because the vehicle.
Truck traffic will depend on customer ordering material. There could be a gap of maybe an hour. And he could be going 25 miles away, and he could be on the job for an hour because maybe they're doing it by wheelbarrow. So it would take time to unload, and he's got to come back. So he would not be on that hourly clock like that. That's answering your question.
I'm trying to fit it in. So your facility can handle maximum 30 vehicles?
Yes.
Is that,
Would you have all 30 there at one time?
No.
No.
That's what I'm saying, no,
but
it's,
operationally, something would be exhausted after the 31st vehicle would not be able to be completed in the process because the other earlier ones would use whatever the process is. Kind of what I'm going for.
Time and materials.
Or people, personnel, because Dr. Thunder mentions it takes about a minute and a half per vehicle passing through. So it's out on the road and gone.
Yes.
So if you had all 30 vehicles were to arrive, a 31st vehicle in the area would not be able to be serviced.
And that would not happen, okay, because you don't want to be having 30 guys sitting there waiting.
And that's
So that's not in the,
right.
equation.
But it doesn't rain beer on Fridays. The other point is that, speaking of Dr. Thunder's work, he does not mention the influence of temperature in terms of noise carrying. Is that a subject that anyone cares to opine on? Because his studies were all done at the coldest time of day, which noise carries the farthest, but also during familiarity with his work, when temperatures are warmer, noise tends to travel less.
We also, can I?
Please.
We also did a wind study, not this one, but the
2013?
right. So we did the wind direction, the time of the wind direction, and the humidity. And that is why, if anyone ever wondered why we put it up in the northwest corner, it was basically to get it away from any of the residential areas as much as possible.
So utilizing the natural elements that Dr. Thunder was attempting to measure, is that correct? And then in terms of the opinion of property values, on what did you base that opinion on?
You know, I'm not a real estate agent or an appraiser, right? I worked on a lot of mine sites, this comes up on every single one of them. I worked on mines that are right adjacent to properties, and the property values go up, price of houses go up. I haven't seen any site that I've been on where anyone said the property values decreased. So it's just from anecdotal experience what I've seen. I just haven't seen it happen. It always comes up, but if you think about it, 30 years from now or 20 years from now, someone's gonna have a beautiful lake across the street. No one's gonna be building anything else there. Eventually the property values are gonna go up if they aren't up anyway. So that's all I can tell you.
I have no further questions.
Okay, I just want to remind the audience that there's no talking. We have somebody recording this, and we can't hear the testimony, they can hear the questions. You know, please wait for your opportunity, then you can talk. Mr. Eldridge, please.
Thank you. What do you expect will be the greatest depth you will mine on the site?
I think it's about 35 feet. From what the information we have is the deepest they would go. You know, they're gonna stop when they hit that clay layer because they don't want to go any deeper than that anyway.
Right.
But I would say it's around that, about 30, 35 feet.
And are there any areas that are significantly shallower than that?
Actually, I think there's an exhibit, should be exhibit maybe 5. There you go. Is that 3? So that kind of shows you can see the pink, kind of the pinkish there, that's the skill one. So it's really the sand, you know, and gravel there above that they would be mining. So just so you can see the scale, each of those numbers on the right, I believe, are 10 feet. So you're looking at, you know, it's 20, 30 feet or so.
That's from the surface.
That's the surface, yeah.
Okay, thank you. When you did the traffic study, did you determine the average daily traffic on Maple Street?
I think it's in there. There's like 1,500 maybe. It's in the report. I can't.
Okay.
I have to look it up, but it's around 1,500 vehicles per day.
All right, and so you would be adding an additional 36 or 37 vehicles going 2 trips each on an average to 1,500. Is that what your testimony is?
Well, you've got 30 cement and 30 trucks, so you got 60 coming in plus 7, so 67 coming in and 67 go out, so it's 134. You got to look at the average daily traffic and see if it's broken down in each direction, but you're going to add that amount to it, right? That amount to it.
Okay. Now, something that I'm not sure I heard my colleague correctly, but I don't think there was an answer to it. I think what he was getting at is if you had tremendous demand for your services, what is the most number of trucks that you could service in a day? And that's considerably more than the 30 you're predicting, isn't it?
That's our maximum.
you can't handle more than 30 in a day if,
Under ready-mix or on,
both ready mix and gravel.
so a total of 60?
I think what they're asking is, if there were no limit on your production, how many trucks could come in? So I think they're asking is, could you have 100 concrete trucks come in a day? Say, you probably don't.
Well, not
get 100.
necessarily concrete trucks, gravel
Oh,
trucks.
grab trucks too, yeah, either one. So I think they're asking is, could you take more than the 30 and 30, or are you kind of limited by your operations to 30 and 30?
That's pretty much our level of service. Does that make sense to you? Any more than that is, be pretty tough to handle.
I think that's a function of the number of employees and how you operate it, and yeah, and the road that you have coming in, there's a limitation on the number that you could have. And you don't want idle trucks.
Right.
The modeling done for noise, did that take into consideration the noise damping effect of the berms you're going to install?
Yes, it did. And actually, because I worked pretty closely with Dr. Thunder on that, I'm making sure he had information he needed. And first we looked at the berms with 6 feet. And at 6 feet, there was a benefit to go to 8 feet. We said, well, let's just go to 8 feet. So that's why we have 8 feet. I did ask him about the trees or whatever. He said it sounds good, but in reality, the trees don't really do anything for noise. So you can plant them for visuals, it'll do good that, but don't count on the trees for anything with noise. But going from 6 feet to 8 feet did make a difference.
Okay. That's, I think that's it for right now.
The site plan that you have submitted has like a little notch cut out because there's a house in there. It's a cemetery? It's a cemetery.
No, it's a house.
It's a house. Somebody lives there, I'm not dead.
The cemetery is about,
It's south of here.
yes,
Okay, so somebody actually lives there, in that house.
in the house, not the cemetery. Yes, correct.
That is what I
I had
was
to-
asking,
yeah.
in the house, yes. Okay, so somebody lives there, and,
As far as we know,
okay.
that
You
someone
didn't
lives
like
there.
knock on the door or anything?
I didn't knock on a door.
Okay. Might want to let them know what your plans are, you know?
Well, we've done this twice now, so,
Okay, all right. So the subdivision that's adjacent on the east, I think it's the east, yes. When was that built, do you know?
on the east, I can't tell you when it was built. All I can tell you that it was, pre-existing of Mr. Deming's gravel pit. And I can't tell you the year. I can go maybe in the early 80s.
Okay, so the houses have been there for some time, that's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, and what's Mr. Deming's gravel pit? I don't know what that is.
That is where that lake is right now, across the street on the east side of Maple.
Oh, the one that they're built around?
Yes.
That lake?
Yes,
Oh, okay, so that was a gravel pit.
it was,
Okay,
yes.
so obviously those houses were put there after that pit closed?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, so they've been there for quite a while, and they've known for some time that this property was planned for a gravel pit?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I was trying to figure on my own, but I'd rather get an answer from somebody here. How long do you estimate that it will produce before you have to, think about another place or whatever? Sorry, I'm losing my voice again.
20, 25?
Okay, I guess 20 years, so I was pretty close then. That's if it's going. If
Yes.
there's a lull, then it would be longer.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we went through the traffic.
Okay, now the trucks, how many trucks, not coming and going, but how many do you suppose would be on the site at any particular time during the day?
I would say on just dump trucks or on
All of them?
10 at the most.
At the most, okay.
Most, it's kind of
Okay,
a question I can't exactly tell you on, who's all coming in.
right, I'm just looking for, an average estimate, whatever, to see. And the reason I'm asking that is because of the backup beepers on the trucks. I find that a lot of people have a hard time dealing with that. And I'm wondering, how many backup beepers they're gonna have to deal with at any given time during the day.
Well, on the backup beepers, we've also contacted our representative from MSHA, and they're gonna give us an input on ones that are, they're activated by depth, meaning if they're within 10 feet of an object,
It'll just stop it.
it'll beep. If it's
Okay.
farther than that, you won't hear it.
Okay, that's an improvement. Yeah. Yeah, if you could go with something like that, I'm sure that would be appreciated by the neighbors.
And we've looked into all that, so.
Okay, good.
And that's one of the things that we're gonna do.
That's good to
And I think
hear.
that's one of the conditions.
Yes.
Now, I was a little confused by Mr. Shu's testimony. Sorry.
That's okay.
I listened, I didn't glaze over, I did listen, but I just somehow missed. The mining, is that gonna be taking place underwater, or is that gonna be above water?
Well,
On the ground?
okay, so, maybe on that, is that exhibit 5?
Should have asked
still up there?
simpler, yes or no?
I don't know if it'll show it on this or not. Yeah, the water table isn't shown on there. Oh, the water table, it looks like it isn't. My eyes aren't very good. There's a line up there. So when you dig down, you're gonna dig down 7 or 8 feet, and you won't be at the water table yet. Once you get to the water table,
And we call that dry.
Okay,
they call
so-
it dry, but it's not really dry. It's, because sometimes there's this concern that you're gonna have this blowing dust and other things. The sand is still moist below the ground,
I
right?
understand that. What I'm relating this to actually is the noise that would be created by this type of mining above ground rather than underwater.
Well, they will bench it so they can work from lower than the ground surface. Once they get down, 7 or 8 feet, they can start working lower. So at the beginning,
What do you mean by bench it?
you want to answer? Go ahead.
Sure. Benching means that we will go from the surface that it is right now, and we will go down roughly about 3 feet above the water, and that will be the bench. And then anything from there below will be excavated out of the water.
So this part of the equipment will be lower than the ground surface.
Okay, so from a noise standpoint, how noisy is that? As I understand it, the underwater mining is not very noisy, it's pretty quiet. But how about the above the bench mining?
So, everything is, we're governed by every agency that's out there, and noise is one of them. And everything has a muffler on it. We have to stay under the limits, or that piece of equipment is tagged out and you can't run it. We put a dosimeter on, and that tells us the noise level.
Right,
So we're governed by that.
okay. All right, I'll accept that. Now, if this petition is not granted, if it's turned down here or at county level, what are your plans for that property?
We'd have to explore all options. obviously, because this is a valuable resource, to my client.
Right. That's why I wonder if you have any plans or no.
You'd fire me. Fire Jeff.
Mark, someone else will hire you.
I guess we call it wishing and hoping.
What?
Wishing and hoping, I guess.
Okay.
We previously we've been approved, and we're hoping that it goes through this time too.
Yeah, it's a little different this time because of the concrete plant. That's a big thing compared to just the mining portion of it. I think that's all I have. We have another one. I will ask for another round. Okay, go ahead.
I just want to reiterate, don't let your vision get, fogged over by the amount of trucks on 23.
Oh, I didn't even ask about that.
Okay. On 23, don't get, thinking that we're going to have that many trucks sit there. Okay, because that's not us.
Yeah, I didn't even ask any questions.
No,
So.
Okay, we'll move on to Mr. Schnapp.
I'll start with that, thank you. As a 30-plus year resident of Riley Township, the amount of truck traffic in the last few years has increased absolutely tremendously between the three gravel operations, the asphalt plant, the concrete plant, and we're not supposed to compare that. I'm just going to mention, before I start asking questions, there's another person in this room right now that's personally experienced 2 semi-tip overs on these traffic circles that were installed, which are too small at the tollway and Route 23 for the truck traffic. That's not your problem. I'm just kind of setting this up a little bit. So we all demonstrated that. The first question I have is at the Ozinga plant on 23, I'm fairly certain that their driveway out right now is gravel from their operation. And I think as a result of that, there's always a continual silt of garbage on Route 23 to the point that if you have a clean car and you drive to town, you're not going to come back to town with a clean car. I'm sure that your pavement would help put that situation to rest. Will there be any type of truck wash before these trucks drive in and out? I know you've got material wash, but what about for the trucks? Because some of the gravel operations do that.
It's basically a wheel wash that's ribbed, so the trucks will go over it. There's water in there, so it knocks everything off. And then being paved all the way out, the residue will not, be tracked out on the Maple Street.
Yeah, that was my main concern with that.
Yeah, I think it should be on exhibit.
Yeah, I saw a picture of the driveway.
Yeah, okay.
Just for all of our knowledge here, you talked about the silo a lot, or silos, just one silo or
One silo.
62 feet, whatever. You mentioned the powder. What exactly is in the powder? Some mixture of lime and something else? Could you educate us on that?
It's a powder, yeah, I think that's cement.
Yeah, that's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, it's cement, I mean, it's in powder, so it's gonna be basically calcium carbonate. I mean, it's a limestone product, so it's not a silica product.
Where does that come from? Who would deliver that?
We have right now, we have a driver from Marengo that delivers to Woodstock. There's a company called St. Mary's. What's that? St. Mary's Cement is who we buy it from. It's picked up out of Waukegan.
How much cement powder does this silo hold, and some number we would understand, tons or what have you, cubic feet?
I think there's 60 ton in the silo.
So how often would that silo need to be refilled? Every day, once a week, once a month?
I would say basically it could be up to 2 times a week.
Okay. And what type of truck or trucks would deliver that material?
It's a semi bulk tanker that comes in there, and he backs up to the plant and he unloads it and puts it into the silo.
So a bulk tanker would be totally sealed and
Totally
closed?
enclosed, yes.
What to you demonstrates the need for an additional concrete batch plant in Marengo?
The need? Well, one closed down in Marengo already, but the need is there. I mean, it's, we are basically, we don't do interstates or anything like that. We're single-family homes, garages, patios, stuff like that. And the need is always there. And the thing is logistics is the biggest thing.
Okay. I'd like to get back to the trucks for just a minute. You had a question about depth operated backup beepers, for example. These are not your trucks. These are not your company's trucks that will be operating, correct? They're private business trucks? Or a mixture?
Most of the trucks are ours, but the customer will come in. But the way we've got this plant designed, the driver will be doing a circle, so he will not be backing up. So this was another study that we said, how can we eliminate as much as we can? And that's why we put everything up in that corner. They come in, go around, and they pull right up, and they get loaded and go straight out.
All right, I won't belabor it anymore. I think that's enough for right now. I'll move on to my colleague.
Mr. Kernick.
Thank you. I just have a few questions concerning the sound generation and the sources of sound generation on the facility itself. And I'd like to separate the ready mix operation from the mining operation first, just for purposes of discussion. Mr. Shu, I gather you customarily rely upon reports prepared by Dr. Thunder?
Yes.
How long have you been working with him?
Well, actually, this is the first time I worked with Steve Thunder. I think his dad did the other mine that I worked on.
And have they done reports for you with other mining operations other than this one?
The dad did one with me on a different mine. I have not worked with Steve Thunder on a mine before.
Did that other mine involve a ready mix operations also?
No, it's purely mine.
So,
Well, I take it back. There was a ready mix, but it was on, there was a ready mix, but it was quite a distance away. That mine.
and I gather you say you're not a sound engineer and you rely on him for the sound level reports.
Yes.
I've just got a general question. I'm ignorant as to sound generation and how it interacts. If you have, let's say, a sound source that's generating 76 dBs sitting on that side of the room, and you have a source here generating a sound level of 70 dBs. Let's say at some distance of 50 feet or 100 feet or whatever, how do those sound levels interact? Do they add? Does one just control over the other? How does that decibel level, how do they affect each other, I guess is what I'm asking. Let's put it this way. Is the sound level higher than 76? If one we have is 76, another is 70, do they interact together and generate some sound level higher than 76?
You know, I'm not an expert at that. What I can tell you is he put all the different sounds in his model to determine what the sound levels would predict the property boundary. So he put those different sources in. So he put the conveyor in, he put this in, because I asked him, did you put the conveyor in? We got information from another site that he worked on that had a conveyor, so he had sound levels he could put in. So he put them all in the model. How that model cranked the numbers and gave him the number, I don't know.
Okay, well then, since you gave him all the data, can you tell me what sound sources he put into his model?
He had sound sources that he had in his library of sounds. Because we didn't have a conveyor at their site to put into the model. So he had another model that he would take the sounds from that conveyor and put them into his model.
Okay, so while he may not have used a specific conveyor at this site, he had a database.
Exactly.
Okay, well, what in this overall database that he had did he put in?
Well, I could, if you don't mind, you know, on page 4 of Dr. Thunder's report, he talks about the computer modeling.
Right.
And he talks about the model the noise from the quarry equipment. Now, you gotta remember, because this doesn't have an active mine operating, there's no conveyor right now, right? So he took stationary sources such as the screens, the crusher, drag line were modeled as stationary point sources, so that was taken into account. Long stationary sources such as the conveyor belts were modeled as line sources. Moving sources such as loader and bulldozers were modeled as point sources. So he did put all of this in, you know, to his models.
Okay, well, here's my question though. He says in his report that he used sound data for the ready mix plant. And he said in his report that his report assumes a quote worst case scenario. What I'm trying to drive at, what is the worst case scenario that he assumed? I mean, we don't know, so far I don't have any information or scientific information upon which I can rely to decide if there's a truck being filled that generates 76 dBs, which is what he says in his report. And if we have right next to that a truck being washed, which according to him generates 70 dBs, does he assume that there's a truck being filled and a truck being washed at the same time? Can you answer that question?
I don't know how, he put them into his model, so I would be assuming.
And is it fair to assume that we can have a scenario where there's a truck being filled and a truck that has just been filled is being washed while one is being filled?
Yes.
Okay, so we can have 76 dB generated, and right next door to that, we can have 70 dB being generated, and I don't have any information how those two interact.
Well, the total that MSHA also governs, and I believe it's 82 or 83 decibels. Anything more than that, we have to do something to change to get it under that.
I understand what you have to do in your operation, but I'm addressing the only expert information we have here before us concerning sound levels. And it seems to me that the ready mix plant itself sounds like it's going to be the biggest sound generator there. I may be mistaken.
No, I believe that's true, that is the biggest sound generator that he had. But he included all the other sources in his model also. So, you know, I see where you're going, and I understand where you're going, but in other words, he put those all into his model. So how does each one affect it? You get the result at the end. You know, I guess you'd have to do a research paper and say, well, if I did them all, but I take this one out, what happens? If I did them all, I take this one out, what happens? You can start looking at all that, right? But he put everything in there and said, this is what I'm modeling the site to be, and here's what we predict the sound will be at the property.
Okay, but he has all his data, and can you say that he assumes that every sound generator in that system is generating sound at one particular time, and that's what the results show? And that's the basis of his conclusion to say sound levels at sources 1, 2, 3, and 4 are only going to be X. That's all I'm asking. I just want to know, what is a worst case scenario that he's assuming?
You know, in looking at the report, you know, his summary goes through the ambient noise, the source noise analysis, his computer modeling, taking into account all of these noise levels, and then he comes up with the conclusion that would not have any effect beyond what the state law would require.
Okay, I understand that, but here's what I'm driving at. He says, quote, "We chose to approximate the worst case positions to model." All I'm trying to find out is what were his assumptions? Were his assumptions valid? were his assumptions based upon, in fact, the operations of this gravel pit in Ready Mix? That's all I'm driving at.
Okay, but what I can tell you is, he had the operations plan, he had the locations where the conveyors were gonna be. We gave him this and said, here's what we have, here's where the plant's gonna be, here's where the conveyors are, here's where the front end loader's gonna be, here's where the crusher's gonna be. Because at first he didn't have the crusher, I said, you have to put the crusher in, so put the crusher in, put this in, so he had the plan, he put everything in. So that's all I can tell you, then he ran it that way, that's how he ran it.
I understand, but again, I just want to know what his underlying assumptions were for the worst case scenario. And to me, among things should be, you've got a truck being filled and you got a truck being washed. That should be part of the worst case scenario. I don't have any information to see that he did that, correct?
I'm sitting here squirming in my chair here right now because I want to say something.
Then you
because
say something.
He, in layman's terms, because that's how I speak, he actually came out and did the study at the plant while a truck was getting loaded. So the numbers that he documented are the numbers that when the plant was running and and the truck was washing down and getting loaded.
I assume he knew what all the sound generators were. And I'm not trying to be difficult, I'm just trying to, here's the problem I have. And I'm certain you've heard the saying, garbage in, garbage out. And that's the same thing we can have with an expert's report. And we like to know what the underlying assumptions are when an expert prepares a report. That's all I'm asking. And that's the concern that I have. Just to make sure that the data that we're looking at and the numbers that he generated are legit. Okay, so you know what I'm driving at there. I've got another question. And I'm looking at table 3 of his report. And he talks about sound levels, and he ascertained, as I understand it, ambient levels, which I assume are levels of sound, and Mr. Shute, perhaps you can correct me. Ambient levels for the purposes of this noise study are what? Is that noise being generated in the environment other than noise being generated by this operation?
Yeah, because this operation's not there, so he did it on the existing property to see what are the noise conditions on the existing property.
And there's a table there, table 2, saying if the noise level at this plant is at a certain level of above ambient, there's some quantitative analysis, I should say qualitative analysis on table 2.
Yeah.
For example, he talks about on table 2, I'm looking at page 7.
Yep.
Table 2 says perceptible difference as a function of the decibel increase.
Right, yep.
And so if the difference in decibel increase between the sound generated by this facility and ambient is 1 to 2 dBs, that's negligible, and the impact on a person or the environment is none.
Correct.
If we get into 5 to 6 dBs, it's clearly noticeable, the sound generated by the facility, if you will, and the impact there is considered mild.
Yes,
If it's 7 to 8, it's strongly noticeable,
yes.
and the impact is considered moderate. At table 3, at noon, at locations 1, 2, 3, and 4, they have a difference being 8 dBs, 7 dBs, 6 dBs, 6 dBs. That to me says that the noise being generated by this facility, according to this expert, is at least moderate at location 1. And moderate means it's strongly noticeable by somebody in the area of 1, correct?
Yes, and that is because the ambient drops substantially right around noon because you don't have traffic on Maple. So
But people across the street are eating their lunch. The trucks aren't
it's at the
going
noon,
by,
it's
so
at the
the
noon time.
noise level would be strongly noticeable to somebody across the street eating lunch.
I guess well, that's what the number says, but I would go back to, I think there's another section in this report that what are the decibels for certain things around your house, and he did scalp off thing you have to look at, he did scalp off on figure 3, the traffic bypass noise levels. You know, he has much lower, and he's very conservative. So if you look at actually what the noise is there, you can see it's up closer to 60 during the noon hour.
But I'm
So-
I'm sorry, sir.
So I see what you're saying, Theo, but I'm saying he ignores all the other noise there, saying, well, it's an occasional truck or an occasional that. And then when you look at the comparison of what 45 decibels is, or even 50, it's maybe a dishwasher. You know, it's all perspective, right? If you're going from 40 to 42 versus 90 to 92, right? It's gonna be different for how a person's gonna feel that.
Yeah, I understand that, but what we're talking about is the impact on sound that this facility is going to have at wherever L1, wherever receivers 1, 2, 3, and 4 were located. And according to the chart, it looks like they were located off the property to the east.
Right, and I'm not arguing, I know you're not either, so, remember, the ambient was done in I think it was, did I say it was December, all the plants were closed, everything else was closed. If we went back out and checked the ambient in May, June, July, it's going to be different. It's going to be higher, because you have other things operating at that time. So, you know, we're comparing the sound study with all the equipment in it to an ambient condition that was done when nothing in the area is operating. So it's a very low number. If you look at the number, it's very low, 45, it's a low number. So that's, again, I didn't input his numbers, I didn't tell him what I wanted the results to be. I just made sure he had all the information and he ran them out.
I understand. All I can say is there are no asterisks at tables 2 or tables 3 to say, however. And his statement says, you know, on page 7 says, we could consider noise to be, quote, injurious, closing, quote, for moderate or substantial impacts. That is levels at 7 dB above the ambient or greater. Table 3 shows this could happen during the hours of the day with the lowest ambient noise, i.e. at noon, for 2 locations.
Yep, it's true.
That's what it says.
That's what it says.
Okay.
Yep.
And I guess one final question, your opinion that this operation would not have any negative impact on property values? Did that assume that the noise level at these areas was not strongly noticeable?
I don't think that would affect it. I really don't.
Okay. I have nothing further.
I had a few questions. First, regarding the mining and the clay layer that's below the aquifer, and you said when you get down to that, you wouldn't go into that clay layer, but actually the county requires that you do not go into that clay layer, correct? That's part of
Right.
one of the conditions.
Right.
So it's not like you wouldn't decide on your own to do it. That's a requirement that the county has.
Exactly. What I'm saying is that there's no benefit for them.
Yeah.
They can't sell
Yeah.
it, they can't do anything with it. It's just
Right.
gonna be an expense.
And as far as the trucks going in and out, is part of it just the way, you know, your business is designed and the structure that you're building for your concrete batch plant, how many trucks it can handle going through there in an hour? Is part of it just the way the facility is designed? That you can handle that many trucks per hour?
The plant is designed to handle that much. It's not that saying that we will do that much.
Correct. But that would be the maximum that your plant could handle in that time. Can you tell me about your batch plant that you have now on Donovan Street in Woodstock? And you said that that's in a residential area. Tell me about that. Tell me how many trucks you do and what equipment comes in to bring in the materials for that batch plant and how that all works.
Our batch plant is located in a residential area. There's townhouses approximately 1,200 feet down our lane. All the aggregate is hauled in. All the powder is hauled in. And then we have a total roughly, I think there's 12 trucks. and we go down residential streets to.
Is that
deliver.
like 12 per hour? Or,
No, that's the total trucks that we have,
okay.
so,
And that's the only trucks that service that plant?
yes. Except for the aggregate being hauled in.
And how often does that come in?
Can happen every day.
So like how many trucks would be in and out of there each day?
You could have 25.
And would the noise of that facility be similar to the noise of the facility that you are putting in now?
Exactly. Except you wouldn't have the trucks coming in and out, hauling the aggregate in.
So when you're mining, say you're starting in the south part of this parcel, so you need then, your trucks or your conveyor belts are taking it up to the concrete batch plant in the northwest portion of that. How does it get from there to the concrete batch plant? By truck or by conveyor belt? How would it-
Conveyor,
All by conveyor belt?
yes. And that's all on the west property line.
Oh, okay. So it just goes to the west and then to the north?
Everything is off to the west. Again, we try to stay away from the residential area. So the conveyor, the access road that we'll have there will be all on the west side, goes straight up to the wash plant, which then is the ready mix plant is there too, and everything is fed by conveyor.
And you testified that the residential wells are in the deep aquifer, so they're not affected in the aquifer where you're mining?
Correct.
Okay. Do you have any estimation, like, you know, you had this approval in 2003 and again in 2013. Do you know like how many new homes there would have been built across the street in those residential lots in the last 10 years? Are there new homes or were they all like pretty much established before your last renewal or?
There was a majority, I believe, that were already established, and there has been some new building. The subdivision to the south, I have no idea, but I think there is some new construction there too.
So that would be south of where the old gravel pit was,
Correct.
that area. So in that part, in the lower section
Yes.
of that, okay. I think that's all I have right now. Before we take testimony from, or questions from staff, I think we'll just take a little 10-minute break. And if there's any other questions by the board at that time, we'll do that as well. We'll take a break if anyone needs to use the restroom.
Yeah, I was thinking, boy, that washing away on it, like Northern Spain. Got buried in the
Folks, quiet, please.
Please, quiet, please, so we can get started. Thank you. We have one more question by Ms. Donner. please.
Yes, I do. I've been listening to your testimony, Mr. Gavers, and I noticed that there are comparisons that you make to those facilities on 23. I go by Ozenga, I know some people's names, and all of those names have changed since I've been part of that. So they bring in equipment from all over the place and take the aggregate all over the place, is the way I understand it. But that's not what you do. You have, I remember years and years ago getting a haul of pea gravel, and it came in a little dump truck. You know, you got 4 or 5 or 20 yards of mulch, let's say. I could get that delivered to my house. That would not be you, but it would be that same kind of thing if I was going to use that on my property. So you're not talking about a lot of those big trucks, but some of them could be relatively small. So in your number of 30, you aren't talking about those number of those large trucks. And your trucks all say Gavers, and they aren't what's your normal load on those?
50,000.
And that's general for when what is it they do to the roads in the spring? They post them, so you're not affected by that as much or as anybody else might be that's on 23. So it's a much smaller operation in general to do all the things that you see being done other places, but this is small by comparison. I just wanted to make sure I understood that properly. Thank you.
Mr. Davis, you have to speak, you can't just nod, it's being recorded.
Yes, sir, yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else have, go ahead.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Cozen.
Sorry, we have to go over old ground per se. The question on the Exhibit 4, which was, has a legend to it, and I'm hoping I'm reading it correctly. It shows a dark circle, and it says those are private wells as of 2013. Then it shows red circles, and it shows them as private wells of 2023. Is it reasonable to presume that the red wells did not exist in 2013?
Yes.
And this record is the record from the Illinois State Water Survey, so only wells that are lawful and potable would be wells that would be identified on here.
It would be only the wells that were in their system.
Meaning the state system.
The state system,
And the
yes.
state of Illinois certifies wells and receives a record for those wells. Is that your
They should,
understanding?
yes.
The other question going to exhibit, and again, it's my visual acuity, is there's a discussion on sensitive site receptors. And that
Which exhibit is that?
Dr. Thunder's work.
Oh, okay.
And there was a total of 6 of them. And there are illustrations of Dr. Thunder of Figure 5 and Figure 6. But looking on Figure 5, the difficulty is trying to locate figures 1, 2, and 3, 4. So it appears that only one sensitive site receptor was on the west side of Maple Street, and the other 5 are all on the east side of Maple Street. And sensitive site receptors 1 and 2 were on the north and south side of Deming Drive, or what one would more accurately describe as the northeast and the southeast corners. Is that your understanding?
I'm afraid to have you repeat that because I was looking for, I believe that's true. I think the sensitive receptor you're saying is that box out property.
Well, see, that's the difficulty with the figure, is we don't have a geographic location
I see.
to associate it with either a common address, street address, or some other point of reference. And so trying to do the best, that's what, just to clarify, do we agree that 1 through 6 is the sensitive site receptors?
1 through 6 are the ones that he looked at, yes.
Which is part of the table that was the subject of prior
Yes.
questions.
Yes.
And that only one sensitive site receptor, number 4, appears to be on the west side. of
Correct,
Maple.
that's that outlot, that 5 acre
The
outlot.
cemetery.
Yes. Well, I don't know if it's a cemetery, it was the
It's a
house
residence.
down.
It's a residence.
I apologize.
Yeah.
He's making fun of me, ignore him.
No, I'm not. And that sensitive site receptors 1 and 2 appear, and this is where I'm looking for some clarification, on the east side of Maple Street, but north and south of Deming Drive. What could be more specific? The northeast corner and the southeast corner of Deming and Maple.
It looks to be in that area, that's all I can tell you, yeah. That's where it looks to be.
Thank you. That's clarified my point. Thank you. I appreciate the
Any
patience.
questions? The staff had any questions?
No questions at this time.
Okay, so now we've come to the part where any member of the public can ask a question. You have a 3-minute time limit. I'll ask you to come up to the front. You'll have to give your name and address. And then I just ask that you be respectful. I mean, this is like a court hearing. So be respectful of the petitioner as well and ask only questions related to the testimony given today. We will start. Raise your hand if you are interested. Okay, sir, come on up. You can just come right up here to the recording table, sure. Just so that we can hear you well as the recording can pick you up.
Thank you.
And get, so your name and address, please.
Yeah, my name is Tim Vincent. I live at 8819 South Hill Road. First question is, at the beginning of all this, it was mentioned that this has all been approved in the past in 2003, 2013. I just wanted to clarify, has a ready mix plant ever been approved on this site?
No.
And then my next question is the noise and the noise study. So on the 30 or so concrete trucks, would those all be your trucks that would reside on site?
They would not reside on site, all of them. Some would not.
Is it reasonable to assume in the wintertime, in the morning at that 7 a.m. start time, they will all need to be started, idled, and moved around to load up with concrete?
In the winter, we usually don't operate, but we can. And no, they would not all be started. It would only be on the order that's been placed for the customer to know what we're gonna haul.
Okay, so at full capacity, they would all need to be started. Okay, and on location. And then my next question is with the noise study. Was that included in any of the public information before the meeting that was provided? Or was that something that was presented just at the beginning of this meeting?
No, it was actually presented a couple of days ago, unfortunately, but the county has it.
Okay. Okay. My next question is, it uses the current sites in Woodstock as kind of a control. However, your ready mix site in Woodstock does not have mining as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I think that covers all my questions. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Anyone else want to speak? Okay, come on up.
Hi, my name is Kathy Bauman. My address is 8408 Maple Street. And I just wondered, related to the wells, and you may have mentioned it, but I just don't recall. With your study, how deep of the well, the current depth of the wells that would be affected or not affected by the mining?
Well, I looked at all the well logs, and all the well logs, the wells are deeper than the clay layer. So they're all deeper than the sand and gravel aquifer that will be mined. So mining the sand and gravel will have nothing to do with the wells.
And what's that depth,
The depth of,
the clay?
well, at the site, it's about 30 feet to the top of the clay, and the bottom varies. It could be anywhere from 10 feet to 80 feet thick. So wells could be anywhere from maybe 60 feet to, they could be 100 feet deep, depending on the location, the well driller, and, they make a determination how deep they have to go to get the quantity, so it depends. But all the wells are gonna be deeper than, and they're gonna be separated from the mine by the Taskilwood Till. The other thing, remember, is that the water is all flowing from east to west, so, and they're not gonna be dewatering for mining, so they're really not gonna change the water level in the mine area. So there really won't be any impact on any of the wells.
Okay, so, and forgive me because it's a lot that
Ask
I
the
don't
question,
understand
that's okay.
there. But so for example, say my well is 50 feet. Is it gonna have an impact on my well, or does my well need to be 100 feet, or does it need to be 80 feet? What would be the impact?
If your well is working now, if it's functioning now, the mine is not gonna change the water level at the well. The well should be fine. Does that mean your well would ever be deepened? There's all sorts of things that could happen to a well, but I don't see it happening from the mine.
Or maybe I should say maybe the aquifer, is it gonna affect the aquifer? Because that exception piece of property, from my understanding, that well will need to be replaced, it will need to be.
Okay. The reason is that well is probably not legal. It's a point well, you aren't supposed to have point wells. It's a shallow well that I would not recommend anybody drink from a well that's 20 or 30 feet in the ground. It's just gonna, you have all sorts of constituents in that top 10 feet that I wouldn't want to drink it. I wouldn't drink from a well at top 10 feet.
Okay, I wasn't sure how deep that was.
It's
and I
not
feel like
deep.
as far as the other wells that are in the
Yeah,
area.
it's not deep.
My other question was the number of vehicles on Maple Street. And
You can
okay,
answer that question.
I think it was like 1,200 per day. So if you add the 120 vehicles or the truck traffic, it sounds like 10%. But me living on Maple Street, I know that most of the traffic occurs during rush hour in the morning and rush hour in the evening. And during the day, there's very little traffic. And traffic by a car is way different than traffic by a truck.
Got to get to a question.
So my question is, do you know what the traffic is during the daytime, not including rush hour times?
Yes, and the traffic study looked at, it had counts every 15 minutes that they looked at the traffic. And they looked at the traffic throughout the day, not just morning and evening.
So what would be the impact of these trucks during that day?
You'll have to have somebody else ask your questions,
Okay.
your time limits. Yes, go ahead, come on, sir.
Afternoon, Dave Diamond, Riley Township Highway Commissioner, 602 Bauman. Question for ZBA on this, or just a comment. I had the
No,
opportunity.
your comments are later. And you can ask-
Comments are later?
Yeah, you can ask them questions regarding their testimony right
You're
now.
gonna get done by 4:30?
No, we won't. We'll have to continue.
Okay, my
this.
question for the petitioner is, if you were to sell or transfer this, do all of the stipulations set forth in the CUP, if it were approved, transfer to the new owner or operator?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll be back with comments.
Anyone else? Yes, come on up, sir.
My name is Jim Nobilinsky. I live at 9206 South Hill, so I'm the property directly across Maple from where you're planning to put the plant. I show up still as agriculture, as multiple lots do. So to your question, are there new homes? Yes, there's many new homes in the area, and there's some still being built. My question is, before we could get building permits from the county, we had to fund a $18,000 FEMA study because we're in what turned out to be a 100-year floodplain. So the majority of our property, we moved our house forward. Part of that floodplain encroaches onto your property. I'd like to understand if we do hit a 100-year floodplain event, because I saw Riley Creek overflow this spring in a standard overflow. Are there provisions and are there ways to protect that 100-year floodwater so that it doesn't back up, impact my property or all of the properties downstream?
That's a good question. So if you look at the line exhibit, we have a berm going on the east side and then it's open the rest of the way down. And we don't want to fill in that FEMA floodplain limit because in reality, the mine will actually serve as a buffer for you really because if it backs up, it's going to go into the, they're almost providing storage for additional water. They're not filling the FEMA floodplain in. We're not filling anything in that would affect your home or the area. So they're not doing any filling. But when they take material out of the mine, it's actually creating another spot for water to go that isn't there now, which would actually could decrease the amount of flooding even upstream.
So there's no risk of anything in that mining area that would contaminate that water?
No.
No. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, come on up.
My name is Jackie Mitzelfeld. I live at 20718 West Coral Road in Marengo. My property is actually just north of yours. I can look out my front window and see it. At my property, I'm right near the intersection of Maple and West Coral. I see almost every accident at Maple and West Coral. I see almost every truck fly by.
Questions?
Yes.
Right now.
Fly by my house, well above the speed limit. Will your trucks or are your trucks going to be governed?
They are governed.
They are governed, and what are they governed at?
62.
Okay. I have a daughter that's sick. We're at Lurie's frequently. She cannot have that concrete dust. It's doctor recommended that she's outside. If I missed it, I apologize. How tall are these berms supposed to be to block this silicate dust?
Berms are 8 foot.
That's it? And what's the length of them? How far around the property do they go?
The yellow line that's all on the east side and then goes up in the north and down to the south.
Okay.
And you're on Coral, so you're about 1,500 feet north of that.
I haven't measured, but yeah, possibly.
We did.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. My next question is, I guess, what would make your concrete better than the area concrete? Stark sold out 3 years ago to Ozinga. They plan to restart concrete production at the end of their C's concrete production contract in 2 years. How are you going to compete with these other concrete plants in such a small town of Marengo? I mean, does your concrete different?
First of all, we're already, you want to call it competing, and we have been, so I don't see that stopping. And everyone, as in the companies, I say, go in different directions. Sometimes they overlap.
Okay. All right, that's it for questions. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, come on up, sir.
Hi, I'm Russell Paul. I live at 8703 Maple Street. I'm that little 5 acre square right in the middle of the pit there. And the question I have is, both of you testified that it wouldn't affect property values, their quality of life. I just want to know if you believe that where my property is located. It will affect my property value.
How long have you lived there?
40 years.
So right from the start when we did it.
Oh, long before you started.
So, I don't see the property value changing.
Oh, well, if that's the case, I know in the first permit you put in, they put like a guaranteed of, value that property does go down. You would stand behind it. Would you be willing to put that back in the next?
That condition did not appear 10 years ago.
20 years ago. 20 years ago.
But it did not appear 10 years ago, so it's not a part of the conditions that we're looking at.
Okay, cool. Could you add that condition if it's not going to go down? There's no. Why would you?
That's not up to us to make that decision.
Like I said, okay. And then the also thing, the noise study, did you study for my property?
Yeah,
My backyard?
I think we mentioned, I think your property is at number 4 that Robert asked about.
Actually, it's figure 5.
It's in figure 5.
And that's not gonna affect my living. I won't notice that.
Again, I think what we said was that the mine needs to meet the state noise levels at the property boundary, which, you know, your site is obviously as close to the site as anybody.
Plus you still have all the pine trees all around, plus there's a berm. So.
Yeah.
No, other comments, please?
But I did see, you know, okay, you did leave the well permit thing, but the well is like 35 feet, but it's.
It's shallow.
Yeah, but I mean, I have it tested out every year and.
You have another question, sir?
I think that's it.
Anyone else? Yes, sir, come on up.
Hi, my name is Ryan Weinberg. I live at 8909 South Hill Road. And just a quick question to you gentlemen and maybe everybody. Would you want this ready mix plant across the street from your home?
Sure. It is right now.
Thank you.
Great question.
Okay, anyone else? I saw a hand up there, yeah, come on up.
Kyle Anderson, I'm at 8613 South Hill Road. I want to know how many gallons go into per yard for a truck, for concrete, for cement truck?
125 gallons in the tank of the back of the truck.
Okay, then how many gallons does it take for per yard for a truck?
Roughly between 25 and 30 per yard.
Okay, and then how many yards does a truck handle?
8.
Okay. So that's what, 200, around 230, 240. And then where will this water come from? Will it be a private well that you guys, or a well that you guys held?
Yes.
Okay. The other question was, there will be actually a building on the site that will like working on the trucks or the plant, stuff like that?
Yes.
Okay, and about how big will that be?
No. Just, how big?
Yeah. It'll be able to handle a semi to be able to pull in equipment?
Well, we're not going to be working on trucks there.
Okay.
So.
That was my question. The other one question was, how thick is, at the lowest part of the clay seam, how thick is that? Like and where is that on the property? You said it goes like from 100 feet down to that really small spot?
Right, right.
And where is that kind of on the property exactly?
Okay, so yeah, it'd be on maybe the exhibit 4, you can show us?
That, up
That's
on the top
the
screen,
east.
that's the south, that's the south end.
That's on the
So we're
south
looking
end.
at that pink part, right?
That's on the south end.
This is in the south end, so
Yeah.
it'll be the southeast side? Or, so like when you're looking at the clay and it gets thicker, that goes to the west or to the
That
north?
goes to the east.
To the east, it gets thicker, okay.
Yeah.
And so at the edge of the property line, like, we say on the west side, how thick would that spot be? I'm just saying, because if you're gonna run a drag line and you're gonna dig out of there, you have no depth chart to tell you how deep you are. And I wanna know how thick that area would be.
Maybe I missed, on which side of the site were you looking?
So if it, like in the worst possible spot that you could be, where we don't have as much clay to barrier between the aquifer, what is the thickness of that clay barrier?
I think at that location there that's shown, I think it's B7, I think it's around 5 feet thick.
5 feet. So if you have a drag line bucket and the guy is running the drag line, he has no depth gauge other than what he sees coming out of the bucket and dumps it. He could actually cut through that.
Well, they're gonna be starting up closer to cell 1, so they'll know where they're gonna be. I mean, the operator will know about where that clay layer is gonna be, and he's gonna see it, and it's gonna be.
Well, see it in the bucket when he pulls it out of the water. There's no other way to tell.
He feels it.
Yeah, you can feel it, yeah.
Are you an operator?
Maybe. I'm just trying to make sure that there's no possible way to break through that. barrier is what my
When
word is.
when you hit that clay, it's like getting thrown in a break,
Yeah, okay.
and you can ask an operator.
Okay. And that's the only thing you guys will be operating at that facility is a drag line? Or an excavator or anything like that?
Yep.
Okay, all right, that's my questions.
Anybody else? Yes?
My name is Beth McKinney. I live at 20307 West Coral Road. My questions to you is, when the truck traffic leaves, is it going to be going north and out Coral, or is it going to be going south? So I'm assuming it's going north
It's, yeah,
and then
principally
going out
north.
Coral. So all of this is gonna go on Maple and Coral. So, another question. So you have a well on the property. Is it tapping into the same water that the residential wells are tapping into? And how many gallons per day of water are you gonna be removing from that for use?
It has not been drilled yet. There is no well on the property.
But you are gonna be using water
They,
from.
they will, yes, they will.
So approximately how many gallons of water per day are you gonna be using?
I can't tell you exactly because it is on supply and demand. But if you do the math on the gallons that a truck holds compared to how many trips he does, he'd probably 2,500, 3,000 gallons.
Per day?
Yes.
Because the average household is around like 12,000, I think, per year. So I'm just wondering if during a drought year, if that's gonna really affect the rest of us?
No, because remember, this well is gonna be a deeper well too, that they're gonna put in.
So it's not gonna be coming out of the same?
It's not coming out of the,
How deep is the well then?
well, it's over 50, 60 feet, so I'd say it's over 60 feet. They may go down deeper depending what the volume they need. You just has to calculate the volume.
It doesn't sound like it's that different from some of the residential wells.
It's gonna be a little bigger, I think, than that. But they have to service the washrooms, they have to service some other things, they've got the plan.
Because I'm really concerned by the amount, when you start tampering with water, that's when people really notice for their properties. They don't want it damaged, like too much being taken out. So, and I think, and I wanted to know, you were talking about acceptable noise levels. Exactly what decibels were the acceptable noise levels? Because everyone kept talking about it, but they weren't giving any numeric quantity. They weren't quantifying what's acceptable. And what was it at the property line, for example, the little piece of property that jogs in there, the 5 acres?
It was on exhibit figure 7, and looks to be about 62 at the property line.
So they're saying that's what he's gonna be hearing in his backyard, is just that?
Well, that's the acceptable. They're predicting they're gonna be around 50, 53.
That's all the questions I have.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Yvonne Daniels, 9305 Riley Road in Marengo. What are your future plans for your plant in Woodstock? Is this going to affect anything you do there? You'll be operating both the same,
Yes.
so Woodstock's not going to change at all based
No.
on this? Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
No.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir, go ahead. Once you've spoken, you've had your time.
Hi, my name is Tony Curiazis. I live at 20506 Dubs, about 200 feet across the road from me. I didn't know the format was going to be like this, so I had more comments and questions at another time, I suppose. The questions I did hear from this thing were, how much does a loaded concrete truck weigh?
64,000 pounds.
Okay, so we're just under, I Googled it, it says they could go to 70. 73,000 is what you said is the road capacity?
Right.
Okay, so we're really towing the line on those 64,000, 73,000, 8,000. Your excavators, Steve, do they run on diesel?
Yes,
And all of your heavy equipment runs on diesel?
yes.
Okay, I don't know the answer to this, so never ask a question you don't know, but in Marengo, our cars don't have to be tested. Do your diesel equipment have to be tested for EPA, smog?
Some are tier 4. Which are,
I don't know what that means.
that means they're up to compliance for emissions.
Okay. You mentioned the real estate in Woodstock probably didn't go down. I quickly Googled some of the houses, these are the values. Some of those houses are right near your plant.
You have a
189.
question? You have a
That was a
question?
question.
Oh, okay.
How was it?
And I said no.
And he said no.
Okay.
So I do, and they're significantly less than our homes, which are 500,000 to 700,000.
That's a comment, that's for later. Now it's time for questions.
I don't know. Can I ask them a question?
No.
No. Oh, just you? Okay.
No, just the petitioners.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry. I guess, there is one head for the attorney. On question 2 of the application that you filled out, it says, is the conditional use compatible with existing or planned future development in the area? And you wrote, the CUP is compatible with the existing earth extraction operations adjacent to the premises. It didn't answer the question if it complies with that. So I'd like to know, does it comply with the 2030 maps?
Yes,
The
and the
2030
staff
plan.
report concluded that as well.
It what?
The staff report concluded that it does as well.
Okay, because it didn't, it shows only agriculture on those maps. It doesn't show any pickaxes.
You have
So
another
if it doesn't
question?
show any pickaxes, does that mean there's no mining allowed there? On the 2030 plan, maps, the overlays?
No, the earth extraction is a conditional use, and that's what we're going through today.
Yes, it is a conditional use.
Okay, time's up. Anyone else have a question? Okay, at this time, we're going to have to continue this because this building closes in 20 minutes. So we're going to have to continue this, and the date acceptable to the petitioner and the county is January 8th. So we will continue this hearing until that date. But before we do that, I want to make sure that I enter, there's a staff exhibit A, which includes 20 emails that was received from neighboring landowners. And then I'm calling it exhibit B. There were another 15 emails that were received.
I'm going to correct you on that. Exhibit A does include all the emails that had been received up until 12:15 today.
Oh, okay. So exhibit A continues, includes every email.
Correct.
Before the hearing today.
Up until 12:15.
Okay.
Looking at my phone, looks like a few more came in after 12:15, but exhibit A is up to 12:15.
Okay. Okay. So I'll close this hearing.
You said the date, but you didn't set a time.
Oh, okay. So this hearing will be continued to January 8th at 1:30 PM in this same room. So this meeting is continued until that time.
Thank you.
You know, that sounds really good.
The right container for it.